Back for some maths, we're going to be multiplying by 10, multiplying by 100, and we're going to be multiplying by 1,000. So the first thing before we can do any of those is we need to draw ourselves a place value table, because of course when we multiply by 10 or 100 or by 1,000, we certainly don't do our times tables, we instead look at drawing our place value table. So we start with our decimal point, and that's really important, that starts on a line, not in a box of its own. And I'm just going to draw some columns out. And you'll notice how I've put the decimal point in the middle, because the place value table actually mirrors itself. So I've drawn my basic table, I've made really sure that that decimal point's on a line. And I'm going to put in my ones, my tens, hundreds, thousands, and it might be that your place value table needs to carry on into kind of 10,000s or 100,000s and so on. But actually, if we cover up the ones, our place value table starts to mirror itself, because we have tens, and over here we have tenths, we have hundreds, and over here we have hundredths, and then so on. After the hundreds we have thousands, so therefore we have thousandths. So when we're multiplying by 10, 100 and 1,000, well, what we're really saying is this is making something, of course, 10 times bigger. But then actually when we're multiplying by 100, that's making it 10 times bigger twice, because obviously our known fact is 10 times 10 is 100. So therefore, if we can multiply by 10, we can probably multiply by 100, because it's just going to do it twice. And therefore for 1,000 as well, and it's all about how many zeros we got. So there it's going to move 3 times, move twice and move once. And it's all to do with this known fact about things getting 10 times bigger. So if I've got questions where we're starting with an initial number and we're going to multiply by 10, the first thing I need to do is put that number into my place value table. Now it's 48, so it's got 4 tens and 8 ones. So I'm going to make sure I put them really carefully into my place value table. So I've got 48, yep, I've got 4 tens, yep, I've got 8 ones. And now it needs to move one place to the left. And we move to the left because when we multiply, things will get bigger. And I'd rather have £40 than £4, and I'd rather have £4,000 than £40. So our place value table is getting bigger that way, and therefore when we multiply, it's always going to move to the left. So it's how many places it's going to move to the left, and it's about how many zeros it's got and how many times bigger it's going to get. So it's 10 times bigger. And we know that our known fact, again, look, 10 lots of 10 is 100. So if we're in the tens, it needs to get 10 times bigger. It's going to go into our hundreds. So I'm going to move an arrow. And then my 4 is going to move into that box. The 8 is going to follow. And then I need to put a placeholder in up to the decimal point. So I don't need to carry on because those zeros would actually go on forever. So we wouldn't bother writing them. But I put zeros in up to the decimal point. And there I've got my answer, which is 480. If I was to do that same question again, but instead it was multiplied by 100, well then we'd expect it to move 2 places. So if I had my 48, it would then have moved across again, and my 4 would have been there with my 8, and I would have had 2 zeros. So it would have been 4,800. And again, if I'd have started with 48 and times it by 1,000, I'm sure you can start to see the pattern now, because it's times in by 10, so it's got 10 times bigger, times by 100, it's got 100 times bigger. And I can maybe start to do some maths without the need for my place value table, but it's always a really good starting point. And it's about understanding what's going on rather than just adding zeros on, because we're not, and it won't always work, especially if we start to come across decimals. So our things to recap: times in by 10, it moves 1 place to the left. Times in by 100, it moves 2 places. And times in by 1,000, it will move 3 places. And obviously if you're going to create questions where you're having a number bigger than 1,000, it will just continue in that pattern. So for how many zeros, it's how many places it moves. That's kind of our sneaky top tip. but we have to understand that actually it's about how many times bigger it's getting rather than just putting zeros on. Because actually if I started with that number and just put some zeros on there, well actually that number hasn't changed at all, so we can't say we're just adding zeros on. That simply won't work. So it's really important, because we're multiplying, our answers are always going to move to the left. So before you try these questions in a minute, draw yourself out a place value table. Again, you might need to extend it a little bit further, that really will depend on the question. So pause the video and have a go at those. Okay, let's check some answers. Hopefully you took the time to be patient and you drew yourself a place value table. But we should have had 1,400, 3,420, and being really careful not to forget the 50's already got a 0 there, so we don't get mixed up and only put 3 on. So there it moved across 3 places, retaining that 0. So there we've got 50,000. 20,300. And again, the more zeros it's got, the more complicated it is, because you've really got to make sure you're not missing any out or getting any mixed up. And then we've got 20,800. So have a go at making some of your own questions. Multiply by 10, 100 and 1,000. You might want to even multiply by 10,000, but you just need to make your place value table that little bit bigger.